Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez announced that the country's national electric system has suffered attacks just hours after the failed incursions on Sunday and Monday. The United Kingdom now has the highest COVID-19 death toll in Europe and the second highest in the world. The UN Refugee Agency is making preparations to counter the threat of the spread of COVID-19 among nearly 500,000 refugees living in camps in Kenya. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez this Tuesday announced that the country's national electric system had suffered attacks just hours after the failed incursions of Sunday and Monday. The Vice President informed that work was ongoing to restore power after the attack on the main power line number 765. Sabotage of the Venezuelan electric grid has been a common strategy during attempts to destabilize the country, as was seen last year when extreme sectors of the opposition staged an attempted coup against the legitimate government of Nicolas Maduro. Venezuelan Vice President of Communications Jorge Rodriguez this Tuesday announced that the governments of the United States and Colombia are taking advantage of the coronavirus pandemic as an opportunity to intensify attacks on Venezuela and attempt to sow chaos in the wake of the attempted incursions into the country.
Quedan algunos elementos perfectamente claros.
There are some clear elements. The first is the level of viciousness of a miserable state for a government like that of Donald Trump and his lackey Duque to take advantage of the circumstances that have the world in the process of fighting a pandemic that has cost thousands of human lives as an opportunity to sow more chaos and violence in Venezuela.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro revealed details regarding 2 US citizens captured on Monday among 8 mercenaries who attempted to enter the country to commit acts of terrorism. Both are US military veterans from Texas, contracted by a Florida-based security company called Silvercorp USA, and are associates of Jordan Gordo, linked to opposition figures J.J. Rendon and Juan Guaido.
Here I have the passport of Deadman Luke Alexander, born on the 22nd of January 1986 in Texas. Here's the passport. Here are his driver license, a war veteran. Here is his ID. Here I have the passport of the other American mercenary member of Donald Trump's security, as they claim. Barry Aaron Sepp, born on May 15, 1978, Texas, the United States. Some of his IDs I have here, some cards belong to him. We have that in our possession. His war veteran ID.
And President Donald Trump on Tuesday denied any involvement by the US government in what Venezuelan officials have denounced as a failed armed incursion into the country. More in the following report by our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Estoso.
Thank you. President Trump denies any US role, any US involvement in what President Maduro said it was a mercenary incursion. He said that comment before leaving to Arizona this morning, and I quote his words. I just got information, nothing to do with our government, but I just got information on that, so well, we'll find out. We just heard about it, but whatever it is, we'll let you know. But it has nothing to do with our government. We get back to you now.
The number of COVID-19 deaths and cases continues to rise in Latin America. Brazil remains the worst-hit nation in the region, with more than 110,000 confirmed cases and over 7,000 fatalities. It is followed by Peru with more than 51,000 positive cases and over 1,400 deaths. Meanwhile, Ecuador has officially reported more than 31,800 cases and 1,569 deaths. They're followed by Chile, Colombia and Argentina as the countries with the highest number of coronavirus cases in Latin America. And Brazil, the South American country hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic, has now seen almost 3,000 more COVID-19 deaths than China. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us the latest on the situation there.
Brazil's coronavirus pandemic has already resulted in public hospital system collapses in 3 states, Amazonas, Ceará, and Pernambuco. In these states, there are no ICU units left for people who are having acute respiratory distress caused by the coronavirus. And with the average recovery time for patients who are hooked up to ventilators being 20 days, doctors are faced with making terrible choices about who they choose gets support and who they leave to die. So in order to prevent that scenario from happening, the governors of several other Brazilian states have intensified their isolation orders. Here in São Paulo, Governor João Doria issued a decree which comes into effect today, mandating that everybody in São Paulo has to wear a mask when they're in public spaces. Bus drivers are now under order not to let anyone get on the bus who isn't wearing a mask, and the same holds for the train and subway systems here in the capital of São Paulo. Now, São Paulo is the epicenter of coronavirus in Brazil. There have been 35,000 cases and 2,800 deaths, with 220 just in the last 24 hours. It's home to 20% of the Brazilian population, and currently, in the capital city of São Paulo, the hospital ICU units are at 90% capacity, and in the remaining parts of the state, they're at 70% capacity. So the hope is that these new restrictions will slow the transmission rate down enough to prevent the hospital system from collapsing like it has in the other 3 states.
The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights on Tuesday warned that overcrowding and poor hygiene in prisons are facilitating the rapid spread of COVID-19. Spokesperson for the High Commissioner, Rupert Colville, also informed that thousands of prisoners and prison officials have been infected in North and South America, while he warned of violence in some facilities. In the past month, 9 inmates died in Peru's Miguel Castro prison, while 23 were killed in Colombia's La Modelo jail when security forces intervened to quash a riot. Other similar violent incidents have been reported in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico and the United States. Some riots occurred after visits by prisoners' relatives were banned to prevent infection, depriving many inmates of their primary access to foodstuffs. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The United Kingdom now has the highest COVID-19 death toll in Europe and the second highest in the world, after new official figures revealed that more than 32,000 people have died from the virus. The Office for National Statistics said more than 29,600 deaths were registered in England and Wales by May 2nd, with COVID-19 mentioned on their death certificates. But with the addition of deaths in Scotland and Northern Ireland, this takes the UK's death toll to over 32,000. Of the coronavirus deaths registered up to May 1st in England and Wales, over 6,600 took place in care homes, representing 22.5% of all deaths from the virus by that point. This figure far exceeds the death toll in Italy, until now Europe's worst hit country. A French hospital that retested old samples from pneumonia patients has discovered that it treated a man with COVID-19 as early as December 27th, nearly a month before the French government confirmed its first cases. Over 25,000 people have died from COVID-19 in France since March 1st. The country confirmed its first 3 COVID-19 cases on January 24th, including 2 patients in Paris and another in Bordeaux. Dr. Yves Cohen, head of resuscitation at the Avicenne and Jean Verdier hospitals in Paris, stressed on Tuesday that scientists had retested samples from 24 patients treated in December and January who had tested negative for the flu. Cohen highlighted that of the 24, there was 1 case that tested positive for COVID-19. France ranks 5th on the list of the hardest hit nations in the world, with more than 170,000 coronavirus cases. Italians began to enjoy more liberties on Monday as some restrictions on productive activities and personal movement were relaxed for the first time in almost 8 weeks. The lockdown imposed on March 10th to contain the COVID-19 pandemic was partially lifted on Monday as the country entered the so-called Phase 2 of restrictions, involving the gradual resumption of social, economic and productive activities. Some 4.5 million people went back to work on Monday, adding to those employed in essential economic sectors that didn't stop during the lockdown. The novel coronavirus pandemic has claimed over 29,000 lives in Italy, while the total number of cases has reached over 213,000, according to the latest data released by the country's Civil Protection Department.
Still, only some basic flavors are available. It takes time. Gradually, people will get used to wearing masks in the reopened shops and restaurants and keeping social distancing.
I'm very happy. The first thing during the break at work is to take out my bicycle, change clothes and ride for a while before going back to work.
Spain reported under 200 new COVID-19 deaths for the third day in a row this Tuesday. However, a record number of people claiming social security benefits for April, as 60,000 people are unemployed, show the economic cost of the measures to control the spread of the virus. According to official figures issued on Tuesday, 5.2 million people received unemployment benefits in April, representing 4.5 billion euros, the highest unemployment spending in Spanish history. Spain is gradually emerging from a strict lockdown, with small businesses reopening this week. The outbreak has killed more than 25,000 people in Spain, representing one of the world's highest death tolls. The United States has now seen over 1.22 million COVID-19 cases and more than 71,000 deaths, according to data from Johns Hopkins University. The worst-hit states are on the east and west coasts, with New York State by far the main hotspot, although Michigan and Louisiana have also been hard hit. However, more than half of the 50 states of the US are now attempting some form of easing of lockdown measures, as President Donald Trump has declared success in America's fight against the coronavirus and continued to push for the economy to reopen. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the number of new cases in the United States could reach 200,000 per day by June, with fatalities expected to jump to 3,000 per day. Despite the increasing number of conclusions reached by scientists across the world that the novel coronavirus originated naturally, many politicians in the United States have continued to lay blame with China, repeating lies and spreading rumors.
On May 3rd, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo claimed in an interview that there was enormous evidence linking the origins of COVID-19 to a lab in Wuhan, the Chinese city hit hardest by the novel coronavirus. President Donald Trump also stated that he had seen evidence supporting that theory during the press briefing at the White House. However, when asked what it was, he said, "I can't tell you that." Ironically, just before Trump made his claims to have seen evidence, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a statement declaring that COVID-19 was not man-made or genetically modified. The conspiracy theories claiming COVID-19 was created in a lab have been refuted by global scientists, including individuals from the public health sector. From the very beginning, Michael Ryan, Executive Director of the World Health Organization's Health Emergencies Program, has insisted on the scientific arguments.
We have listened again and again to numerous scientists who've looked at the sequences, looked at this virus, and we are assured that this virus is natural in origin.
Richard Horton, Editor-in-Chief of the Lancet Medical Journal, told China Media Group that conspiracy theories risk destabilizing the response to the coronavirus and that the origins should be studied scientifically.
As the Director General of the World Health Organization has said, we've been fighting two pandemics in recent months. One, a pandemic that has been caused by a virus, and two, a pandemic that has been caused by disinformation. And the pandemic of disinformation is in many ways as dangerous as the pandemic caused by the virus.
The Wuhan Institute of Virology, which has been blamed for the outbreak by many U.S. politicians, has received scientists from many countries, including the U.S., since its establishment. Yuan Ximin, a researcher at the institute, stressed that the lab is unable to synthesize a novel coronavirus and has never done so. The lab strictly follows biosecurity procedures and has been recognized by industry professionals from around the world. The plotting of certain U.S. politicians in order to distract attention from their mishandling of the health crisis include U.S. media company BuzzFeed, revealed how some U.S. right-wing and anti-China politicians concocted conspiracy theories for their own political gain to call on China to pay reparations for the coronavirus. However, these same politicians have little to state when it comes to explaining their failures to handle the crisis and implement necessary prevention and control measures. Questions remain unanswered regarding when the COVID-19 outbreak really began in the U.S. and whether the official numbers reflect the reality. It's time for these U.S. politicians and the President himself to offer a full explanation to the American people and the international community.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations Refugee Agency is making preparations to counter the threat of the spread of COVID-19 among nearly 500,000 refugees living in camps in Kenya who face overcrowding and poor sanitation. The UN agency has warned that an outbreak among the refugees could be disastrous. Meanwhile, the Kenyan government has heightened COVID-19 surveillance in refugee camps as identified cases continue to rise in the past week. Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i declared a lockdown in Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps last week, which host nearly 500,000 refugees from Somalia and South Sudan, respectively. On Monday, the number of COVID-19 cases in Kenya jumped to over 500, while 24 fatalities have been reported. As of this Tuesday, the confirmed COVID-19 death toll on the African continent stands at 1,843. According to the Africa Centres for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 47,000 cases have been confirmed so far. South Africa continues to be the hardest hit country in the continent with more than 7,200 cases and 138 fatalities, while Egypt closely follows with over 6,800 cases and a death toll of 436. Morocco ranks third with more than 5,100 cases and 180 deaths, while Algeria places fourth with over 4,600 cases and 465 fatalities, representing the highest death toll on the African continent. Of Africa's 54 countries, only the Kingdom of Lesotho has yet to report a single case of the virus. Uganda began to loosen one of Africa's strictest lockdowns on Tuesday after President Yoweri Museveni declared the infection had been tamed. Uganda, alongside neighbouring Rwanda, had some of Africa's strictest lockdown measures, including the closure of all but absolutely essential businesses, curfews and bans on both private and public transport. Schools and international borders are to remain shut. According to Museveni, after a 14-day period, authorities will announce the next level of reopening. COVID-19 cases and fatalities reported across Africa have been relatively low compared to other continents. Uganda has 97 confirmed cases and has reported no deaths during the 45 days of restrictions. The government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has warned of the large-scale spread of COVID-19 after around 100 inmates of a military prison tested positive for the virus. According to a cabinet meeting press release issued on Tuesday, contamination at prisons could lead to a large-scale outbreak due to their overcrowded conditions. The first case of the coronavirus in the Central African country was registered on March 10th. Since then, 705 cases have been confirmed and 34 deaths. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said on Monday that if Israel persists in annexing parts of the West Bank, existing agreements with Tel Aviv and Washington will be annulled. During a special virtual meeting of the Non-Aligned Movement on Monday, Abbas reiterated that if Israel annexes the Jordan Valley and part of the occupied West Bank, Palestine would be absolved of all obligations, agreements and understandings with that country and the United States. The Palestinian leader also urged the international community, the United Nations and its Security Council to prevent the Israeli regime from taking advantage of the coronavirus pandemic to continue with its plans for annexation. Finally, Abbas called for the immediate release of Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli prisons, holding Israel responsible for their safety. Some 81 Puerto Rican artists and personalities have come together to sing the famous song Preciosa as a message of support to the Puerto Rican population in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we finish this news brief with a clip of the video. Remember, you can get all the latest news on our website as well as on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching and enjoy the music.
Preciosa, te llaman la zona del mar que te baña. Preciosa por ser un encanto, por ser un Edén. Y tienes la noble analogía de la madre España y el fiero cantío del indio bravío. Lo tienes también. Preciosa te llaman los bardos que cantan tu historia. No importa el tirano te trate con negra maldad. Preciosa serás sin bandera, sin lauros ni gloria. Preciosa, preciosa, te llaman los hijos.